in the flickering candlelight of ancient palaces, where shadows danced as cruel whispers. There reigned an emperor whose name still echoes as a curse in history. Gaius, better known as Caligula, the man whose power fell into the abyss of perversion. His reign, brief yet unforgettable, remade the palace into a theater of humiliation and horror. He turned assemblies into arenas for sexual domination, his authority stretching into beds and bodies as if the entire moral fabric could be bent to feed his appetites. It began with marriages forged not by love but by whim and power. Junia Claudilla died in childbirth, and soon thereafter, Caligula, seeking both alliance and an audience, engaged in an affair with Unia, the wife of Macro, the Praetorian prefect, before casting her aside when pleasure faded. Next came Livia Orestilla, abducted from her wedding feast, destined to be emperor by force, only to be banished the following day and forbidden ever to return to her husband. Lalia Paulina, beautiful, wealthy, and infertile, was elevated to bride, then discarded and exiled with orders that she never again bear a child. But these forced unions were only prelude to darker horrors at banquets. Wives were paraded before him, inspected as though they were pieces of property. If he desired, he would take them into private chambers, and upon his return, regale guests with humiliating details of their performance. Each act was a display of ownership, a ritual of imperial atrocity. In such moments, the line between lust and tyranny vanished, and the empire's power manifested through the desecration of dignity. Yet, as dark as these stories are, they carry more than shock, they carry weight. These were not merely rumors, but narratives of victims whose consent was shattered, whose names are often lost. In telling this, we begin to see the horror, but also the resilience of those who suffered under unchecked power. Alongside forceful marriages and public degradation, Caligula was also infamous for incestuous relationships, the most notorious being with his favorite sister, Drusilla. Ancient sources recount that he treated her not merely as family, but as a spouse, even reserving honors for her at banquets, elevating her in ways that scandalized Rome. These stories may have been exaggerated by Rome's moral critics, yet they reflect a climate in which intimacy became political weaponry, an extension of domination into the most sacred bonds. Drusilla herself, consecrated as a goddess after her death, became both symbol and casualty of his blurred need for control. Whispers also speak of sexual cruelty, of hostages forced into the emperor's bed, of lovers whose survival now depended solely on calamity and compliance. Suetonius and other writers accuse him of relations with Marcus Lepidus, the actor Mestor, and even young men of noble birth, suggesting that Caligula used sexual access as a method of political domination. Through these acts, he asserted that no body was free from imperial will, not senators, not hostages, not even those who stood in places of power. Yet modern historians caution, in, rightly so, that much of what we know about Caligula is filtered through the lens of propaganda. Roman historians loved scandal, and tales of incest and debauchery served a political purpose: to depict fallen tyrants as monsters. Alois Winterling argues that much of these accounts may exaggerate, turning shadow into caricature. But the victims' stories remain: mothers and brothers, daughters and wives, and the faceless hostages. Through the dark rumors, their trauma speaks across time. Today, our task is not to revel in depravity, but to name its cruelty. to honor those denied dignity by history's most powerful. In recounting these stories, we bring light to their suffering and refuse to let it dissolve into legend. What meaning can we modern viewers, seekers of history, draw from the darkness of Caligula's reign? We may not grant his victims redemption, nor reclaim their stolen agency, but we can listen. We can honor the memory of those broken by tyranny, recognizing that power without accountability turns intimacy into injury. There is pride in remembering the resilience of those whose bodies were invaded by empire, whose hearts may have been silenced but whose stories endure. In our telling, they reclaim voice. Their trauma demands justice, not through vengeance, but through remembrance, empathy, and truth. We are custodians of history's fragments, and through this channel, History Memories, we choose to elevate, not spectacle, but compassion and understanding. We live in a world shaped by historical echoes. Discrimination and racism, abuses of authority, violations of personal dignity, they still haunt our societies. By unflinching examination of historical horrors, we refuse to sanitize the past. We affirm that survivors across time and culture deserve acknowledgement, justice, and the affirmation of their humanity. Let this story be more than sordid legend. Let it be a mirror. Power that silences cannot be allowed to go unseen. Authority that degrades cannot be permitted to stand unchallenged. And those who survive oppression, who live through violation, discrimination, or injustice must be recognized for the courage it takes simply to endure. In this reflection, we draw strength. We transform history's wounds into fuels of empathy. We proclaim, your life, your dignity, your suffering, none of it is forgotten. In the gravity of Caligula's darkness, may we find our collective resolve to stand for justice, to protect the vulnerable, to preserve the memory of those who had no power to say no.